So in an earlier video, I discussed the 5 common conflict styles from the TKI assessment, the Thomas Kilmann Management of Differences exercise. Today I'm going to take a deeper dive into the concern with avoiding tendency.
Why are you avoiding me?
So I'm going to start by reminding you of what we mean when we say avoiding. Then I'll share with you some of the advantages of this approach. That is, some of the times you should actually deploy an avoiding style. Then I'll offer some advice on how to manage some of the downsides or the disadvantages of avoiding style. And if you stick around to the end, you'll get some advice on how to negotiate with somebody who tends to have a concern with avoiding style. I'm Bob Bordone. I'm a senior fellow at Harvard Law School. I'm the founder and principal of the Cambridge Negotiation Institute, and I have been using the TKI assessment in my negotiation teaching for more than 25 years. So I'm really glad that I'm going to be able to share part of what I have learned about it with you here. So, as we dig in, I want to remind you that the TKI assessment is about a tendency, not a single style. The truth is, all of us show up in different ways depending on the context, depending on our preparation, depending on the relationship. However, this instrument does help us understand some of our default tendencies in situations of negotiation and conflict. So it is important for you to remember this, that we are not saying you are always an avoider or you are always an accommodator. But this is the tendency, and we're looking at a particular tendency today, which is the avoiding one. So let's discuss a little bit, what is the avoiding tendency? Folks with an avoidant tendency tend to be a little bit low on both assertion and on empathy. Typically what happens is this individual doesn't pursue their own concerns or frankly those of the other person. They would prefer to work around rather than address the conflict.
Oh, it's fine. Oh, never mind.
That might look like sidestepping an issue diplomatically, maybe suggesting that we talk about it another time, maybe simply withdrawing from a situation where they feel like they're in a threat. Now, some of you might be thinking like, oh my gosh, that's me and it's terrible. But let me say, actually, there are some advantages to being an avoider, and there are some times when you actually want to use this approach. For example, when an issue is really relatively unimportant, or when there are other more important pressing issues, avoidance can be really helpful. Now, I gotta tell you, I am not an avoider, but there are times when I just admire somebody who could let something go and move on with their life. And there I am picking at it, making the situation worse, and it's only like later that night when I'm writing in my journal and I'm like, I cannot believe I drove everyone on the committee crazy for this one issue. So other times you want to use the avoiding tendency is sometimes the cost of confronting truly does outweigh the benefits of resolution. Here's another thing. Some problems really do go away with time.
Not all of it, but some.
And sometimes avoiding is good because you need to let the other person cool down, right? You're going to have a better conversation once their emotional blood pressure has more composure. Sometimes avoiding is helpful because it allows you to gather more information before engagement. And sometimes avoiding is helpful because, frankly, others are in a better position to resolve an issue more effectively and more efficiently.
Okay, duly noted.
So I really want to capture that there are advantages to avoiding because I think sometimes this tendency is seen by people as awful. Now, it is true there are disadvantages, and some of the disadvantages are pretty high because it is true that sometimes problems go away with time. And it is also the case that some problems don't go away. And if you don't address them, they fester and it gets worse. And the problem never gets solved. Even worse, and you know this if you're an avoider, that sometimes what can happen is something goes unaddressed, and then suddenly you blow up. So the problem with this is the person on the other side has no idea that there's been an issue because you haven't raised an issue. And then suddenly there feels like a tirade. The other concern about avoiding, it can be really easy to get exploited. I am somebody, as I said earlier, who is not an avoider. And I got to tell you, sometimes when I'm around avoiders, my jaw hits the floor because I'm stunned by how little they negotiate, by how quickly they are to walk away. How do you handle this? How do you handle these disadvantages? One is just really good preparation. So remember to stay in the game. The other is to do some work around growing your own comfort with the discomfort of conflict. Also, and I find this as somebody who does engage, working with a competitor colleague, working with a coach like me can be really helpful to give you the skills to stay engaged. I think it can be really helpful also to remember that you can disagree without being disagreeable. Last thing to say here is if your tendency is to avoid all the time to your detriment, expand the time frame a little bit. What are the consequences you will face if you don't engage this sooner rather than later?
Okay, I'm thinking, all right? Let me think. Okay.
Okay, this piece I suspect many of you have been waiting for. If you have to work with avoiders, if you have an avoider in your family or in your life, here's some advice on how to deal with them. Give them the time they need to engage. The more you press them, the more they're going to go into their shell. If you're stuck about how to get them to engage, here's a really important thing to do. Ask them what works. Use questions, open-ended questions, active listening.
Last I checked, communication is key to understanding.
The other thing you want to do is follow up with them, right? They may say to you, oh, here's what would be a good time, or here are the circumstances under which I will engage. And then you never hear from them again. So check in with them. Maybe even say to them, hey, can we follow up in 3 weeks? Can we put something on the calendar? Because I really want to work this out with you. One thing I want to caution you if you engage with avoiders is avoiders aren't weak. So if you think, oh, they're always avoiding, I'm getting my way, be forewarned, right? Because at some point, if you don't get them to engage, things may blow up. Boom! So with that, a plea for me not to avoid. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and ring the bell for more advice on how to stay with conflicts and how to resolve them for mutual gain. Also, be sure to keep watching my playlist on conflict styles. I'm Bob Bordone, and thanks for watching. Okay, it's not difficult to keep watching. Click, click.